Welcome to part 64 of this tutorial series. Today I want to touch on something that you would put in a survival game, the idea of environments affecting the player. And as we get into this, you'll see what I mean, but just in case it's not for you, basically we're going to give the player an internal temperature, and we're going to adjust that temperature depending on whether they're in a hot zone or a cold zone. We'll also add a poisonous toxicity type of zone there as well, and this will be applicable when we talk about water much later on. So to get started, let's pop over to our blueprints folder. We're going to right click, make a new folder, and this is going to be called environments. With your environments folder, double click on it, and let's create a new blueprint class, and that blueprint class is going to be an actor. This is going to be our first environment. Let's start off with b_environment_cold. There we go. So that's our first environment. Let's open this up, and as you've probably seen before, we're going to start with get player character, cast to hero, and right click, promote to variable, reference hero. So that's the usual, what we're starting with. Next up, we're going to add a component. That component is going to be a box collision, and we can just leave that named box because it's going to be the only thing here. Normally I'd suggest naming it something. Let's get rid of begin overlap and event tick. Let's get the add on component begin overlap and add on component end overlap. You've likely seen all of this before, but all good. We're going to just quickly get this done. And then we're going to put a branch here. So let's attach this tab over here because I don't know why the tabs don't auto attach. I'm sure there's a shortcut somewhere, but moving on, let's go back to the blueprints folder, open up our hero, and we're going to add a variable called temperature. And it's going to be a float, so we can go up and down in increments. So we will compile and save that, and now pop over here, make a little bit of space here, and we're going to go custom event. It's going to be called drop temperature. But we're not just going to call that event. We're going to go set timer by event, plug that into true, and plug our drop temperature into there. The time's going to be 0.1. and it's going to be looping. If we don't select looping, it'll fire once, and that'll be the end of it. Then once that's there, we'll grab another reference to our hero, and we'll get temperature to start with. Once we have temperature, let's subtract from temperature, and this will be a 0.1 subtraction. And then we're going to grab ourselves a clamp because we don't want temperature to drop too low. It's not going to be very practical. And then we'll grab that hero reference again, just copying and pasting as you would on Windows. And we're going to set temperature, just like that. And plug the executable in there. And we want our max to be about 50 and our minimum to be -50. So 0 is kind of going to be the point, because obviously we live in a world where most of us are on Celsius and some of us are using Fahrenheit. I'm going to leave the maximum and minimum up to you. So wherever you're living in the world, whatever makes sense, I'm going to set 50 just as a default. And if you want to set this up to be accurate to whatever you think the point of death would be. But for now, just for our purposes, I'm going to set it to 50. The important thing is that whatever your minimum is, and whatever you put in the next field here, which is going to be an equals, float equal float. They need to be the same. So I'm going to punch in -50 here, because here's what's going to happen. Every time this event fires, it's going to subtract 0.1 from the temperature, but it's going to be clamped at 50. When we reach that minimum value of -50, that's when we're going to start doing some damage. And the damage we can do, we can grab reference hero again and affect health message. We don't need to do anything too fancy for that. We can just punch that in. So it's just going to stop. This will be kind of irrelevant, this part of the script. And then we move on to actually doing the damage once we've hit our negative. The end overlap is going to be for drag off return value off set timer by event and go clear and invalidate timer by handle. Now your executable is going to want to plug in here, but we don't want to clear and invalidate the timer as soon as it's been set. That'd be pointless. So we're going to just plug true in over here. And I know that this blue line's weird, but you just got to kind of go with it. You could spend all day trying to clean it up, but sometimes you just have to accept the spaghetti. So when we enter it, we're going to subtract our temperature. When our temperature hits a certain threshold, we're going to affect health. And then when we leave the box, we're going to stop doing that. So this will be great for an area, say a snow region, and we're going to set up a little temporary region to test this all out as well. And later on, if we talk equipment and say like a buff, like wearing a warm jacket or wearing a particular piece of armor, then we'll come back in here and we'll check for that armor before we fire the event. But for the meantime, that's what's going to get us started. There's one more thing we need to do though. Come over to construction script. Now, construction script is this great little piece of script here that anything we plug into here won't wait until the game starts. If we go over to the event graph, event begin play, pretty self-explanatory. That's not going to fire until we hit play up here. Construction script is going to run with us. So we don't have to play the game to set a certain value. And more importantly, we can set things in the editor. So what we want to do is create a variable and call that zone size. Then we're going to drag our box in, holding control, and we're going to set box extent down here. Back on zone size, should have done this before, but we're going to change that to a vector. So it's an X, Y, and a Z or Z coordinate. Then we're going to straighten that up, and that's going to be our construction script. One final step, click the little eyeball here so we can edit this per instance. So hit compile and save, and we should almost be good to go, except that we have no way of knowing how cold we are. So let's pop into user interface, HUD_player, and I'm going to leave this design aspect up to you. But for now, let's just grab a text block. Our font, which is going to be the Hello font. Let's punch in a number, which is going to be 0 at the moment. What we're going to do is create a binding for this text and then put our degrees Celsius next to it. So let's hit size to content. Copy that over, paste it again. And then let's wrap these both in a horizontal box. Grab this text, put that into the horizontal box so they're next to each other. Now I prepared ahead and got the degree Celsius sign. So the Halo font isn't responding very well to that, but hey, that's all right. So this one I'm just going to leave as default. This text here, I want to create a binding. And I'm just going to call that binding get temperature value. It's going to be really simple. We're just going to get our reference hero, get temperature, and punch that in there. With the entire horizontal box selected, go down to visibility, and we're just going to create a binding. It's going to be get temperature viz, and it's just going to be our reference hero, get temperature, and check if temperature is equal to 0, or whatever your middle point is. Again, this is down to how you want to set this up, where your optimum temperature is. Let's drag off return value, select, plug in that, and if temperature is equal to 0, we'll go hidden, and if it's not, we'll go false. Compile and save that. One more thing I want to do for this is get a post process. Just change it up a little bit. Now, a post process volume is going to apply an effect to the zone. Now, because our zone size is attached to a construction script, we're not going to see anything. So let's default our zone size to 500, 500, and 500. Again, you'll be able to play with these in the editor. Now, if I grab that post process, you can see that you can apply a bunch of effects. And when the player steps in there, all these effects will apply. So I'm just going to pick something very simple for now. I'm just going to go to offset and grab this blue, and I'm going to adjust it to about 0.1, right? Just to kind of simulate something cold. And don't forget to click unbound so that's false, and then compile and save that, because otherwise your volume will take up the entire world, and we don't want that. I'm just going to add a little bit of green in there so it's a light blue. It's pretty intense for an offset, but you'll get the idea. And don't forget to attach the post process to the box so that it has a volume to go to. So there we go. Now with our environment dragged in here, we will have a visual cue of when we've entered the volume, and we'll have our gauge pop up as well. So right now our HUD's not popping up with anything. We've entered the cold zone and our temperature is dropping. We can see that there's kind of a cold effect here affecting us. And I'll fast forward this until it hits 50. I'll test stepping out. So we're at minus 20.9 degrees Celsius. If I walk back in, we start counting again. Then we cap at 50 and our health starts taking damage. So that is working as intended. And one more test, if we step out, it stops damaging us. But now if we enter the cold zone again, we'll start damaging. So the way to reverse this effect would be to, say, sleep in a bed, take a particular item. Let's say, I don't know, we had an inventory item, which just happened to fix our cold effect. That'd be nice. But it's all working as intended. In the next episode, we'll do a hot volume and a toxicity one.